Why would you want to work for the Town of Marana? Well, let's hear what our employees have to say.
I feel like working for the Town of Marana makes you feel like a person, not a number.
I really wanted to work for the community where I lived.
I have children that play in the parks.
Working for a public entity, it's kind of a sacred trust. I like that. It's an honor to serve.
The town's mission is to provide five-star service for a thriving community.
To me, five-star service comes from within. It's a drive to make your surroundings a better place.
Providing community service like the Founders Day Parade, the swim lessons, clean drinking water.
Of course, the benefits are great.
I get sent to seminars and conferences. And
Town of Marana compensates vacation.
We do have an amazing gym facility, alternate schedules as well. Our employees are also able to telework.
My supervisor in particular really cares about our work-life balance.
My colleagues are fun. It's just a fun place to work.
We have a culture of friendship.
The people in general that work here and apply here all want to make a difference in their everyday life for themselves and for the community.
Let's make an impact on our community. Visit maranaaz.gov/careers and apply now.
Marana is changing. More people and businesses are moving here every day, which means we need streets, paths, and public transportation services that meet our future needs. Leave your mark and tell us what you want to see in your community. Visit maranaaz.gov/transportation master plan.
Welcome to Real Talk with the Town, where I sit down with the Marana staff to answer your burning questions about our beautiful community. My name is Terry Rozema, and I'm the town manager for the town, so let's get started. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Real Talk with the Town. My name is Terry, and I'm the host for Real Talk. And today we are going to be talking about our natural environment here in Marana. And I have a very special guest with me today, Jennifer Flood. Jennifer, can you just go ahead and tell the listeners a little bit about what it is you do for the town?
I am currently the Deputy Director of Public Works for the Town of Marana. So I oversee the capital improvement section, building all of the capital projects for the town. Have worked in development services and engineering and environmental.
Okay, so you hit on the last one there. You've worked in environmental. Now, that's kind of a specialty of yours, is it not? I mean, that's really why you're here today, to talk to us about the environment. So tell us a little bit about, your education and your experience in this area of working on environmental issues.
I first came to the town 22 years ago. My degree is actually in environmental engineering, so I definitely have a passion for environmental issues and the environment. I started working on all things environmental for the town. I got to work on the stormwater program. I got to work on the town's habitat conservation plan, sustainability programs, and it really just became something that I just really enjoyed.
And not only do you really, and I'm going to give you some props here, Jen, and I think I know this kind of stuff probably embarrasses you, but there's not an audience, so you don't have to worry about your face turning red in front of people. But I just wanted to give Jen some props here for our listeners who don't know. Jen's expertise in this area is quite impressive, and to sit in meetings with her, talking with members of our community, to really convey the level of knowledge and understanding that she has and the level of compassion and passion for this issue is really quite impressive, and we're very fortunate to have Jen a part of our staff. So Jen, I know that was it probably made you feel uncomfortable. I didn't intend for that, but
No,
nonetheless, I do want to open up here with a little icebreaker, because you are somebody who loves the environment, you also love animals, and you are a barrel racer, and you happen to ride a famous horse. So tell our listeners a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've been barrel racing since I was 7 years old. It's something I really enjoy. I was fortunate enough to get an absolutely incredible horse who has placed numerous places, was second in the state of Arizona several years ago.
Wow, fantastic, exciting stuff. So is this horse that you have right now, is it your favorite horse of all time? Can you even put a favorite label on any of that?
It's hard to put a favorite, but she is definitely one in a million. She's got the personality, the speed, the skill. She's absolutely incredible.
It's kind of like somebody asking you which one's your favorite kid, right?
Yes, that is a
Kind of the
difficult
same
question to
thing.
answer.
So let's talk about the environment, because our listeners, and we have quite a few people that ask us these questions from time to time about the environment and what we're doing to preserve the open space, the natural space, the animal corridors and things of that nature. So can you tell us a little bit about what defines natural environment? Because the question comes in from one of our listeners: does Marana value the natural environment? So let's start with that question. In your opinion, does the town place emphasis on the natural environment, and is it of importance to us?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's an excellent question, because, this is our sense of place in the Sonoran Desert. This is one of the few places in the world that has this type of diverse, environment. And I think it is very special, not just to the town of Marana, but for us as a community. It kind of brands who we are. So I would say absolutely that it's important to the town of Marana for many reasons. The town of Marana has the Tortolita Preserve, which we've preserved 2,400 acres for, the future of Marana, and being able to, hike in those areas and see what that's all about. The town of Marana designated 104 acres for the El Rio Preserve, and preserving some of our natural environments there next to the river. So, to have a river in this community and to have Sonoran Desert landscape in this community, it's kind of a gem for us. And so I feel like it would be a very missed opportunity for the town to not value and protect these resources.
Yeah, so I agree with you 100%. I grew up in the Midwest in Michigan. I loved it there. It was a great place to grow up. But I have to agree with you that the ecosystem here in this area is very unique and very special. And I like how you hit on a couple of really important things relative to demonstrating the emphasis that the town of Marana places and the value that it places on the natural environment relative to the preserve. So there's 2,400 acres that the town has set aside. And when you talk about value, the town pays roughly $600,000 a year to preserve that area of our community. The amount of money, millions of dollars that have gone into El Rio Preserve. So I think to say that the town values the natural environment is spot on, and I would certainly value the opinion of somebody such as yourself who takes that so seriously. But let's talk a little bit about wildlife corridors, because this is something we hear a lot about, and the fauna and flora of our area certainly very important. We want to make sure that the animals have safe passage. We got some very busy corridors, the Tangerine roads, the I-10s, all of those major roads. So talk a little bit about where some of those major wildlife corridors are and what we can do to really help preserve and protect the animals.
That's something that we've worked extensively on, for the last 20 years. There's a state map for wildlife corridors. There's regional maps for wildlife corridors. And then, of course, the town of Marana has identified wildlife corridors. And it's really critically important, especially for a community like us that's growing so fast, to have those identifications so that we can work with, new members of our community that are coming in on which areas are important and why they're important. So a minute ago, we talked about the Tortolita Preserve and we talked about the El Rio Preserve. Those two are critically located between an important linkage between the Tucson Mountains and the Tortolita Mountains. Mm-hmm. So maintaining these large blocks of land to preserve and maintain connectivity across these mountain ranges and to water sources is very important. We have areas of Pima County in there. Pima County has been a fantastic fantastic partner in working to elaborate on those areas and make large blocks of land to connect those two pieces. So it's really been important, not just to the town, but to the region as a whole. The Regional Transportation Authority has included funding for wildlife linkages to make sure that we can accommodate this across roadways. So not just configuring our development in productive ways to allow wildlife movement, but also can they get across the roadway, and are we providing opportunities for connection with our transportation projects. So the town of Marana has been very active and very involved in all of these opportunities with wildlife linkages.
So what if you were to identify like a major corridor for the animals, where does that kind of start in Marana, and where does that kind of conclude going through Marana?
So there's a number of corridors, and we just spoke about one. Definitely important to get from Saguaro National Monument and get up to the Tortolita Mountains, kind of coming across the Tucson Mountain Finger by the Santa Cruz River there, getting across the river, across the freeway, large obstacle, and then through the lands of the town of Marana up into the Tortolita Preserve and areas that we have going into the mountains up there. That is very important. That's important to many species, but there's also other critical areas that are important. The Santa Cruz River, for example, that's a major connection that doesn't just involve the town, but involves multiple partners in this region and beyond. So maintaining our wildlife connections in our river and not destroying the environments that have been created with the water flowing in the river, making sure that those connections are maintained. There's a lot of minor connections. Some species don't range mountains. Some species may go 200 meters in their whole life. So, just making sure that we have connections across roadways and, much smaller scale as well. So, there are the major ones that we have here in the town of Marana, but there's a lot of smaller connections that are as important. Prospect Wash, for example, very critical connection up.
And where is Prospect Wash for our listeners?
Yeah, so Prospect Wash is up. It's one of the washes that comes down the Tortolita Fan, kind of runs along the south side of Dove Mountain, and then crosses Tangerine Road.
Yeah, so how are we going to protect, animals coming across Tangerine Road through Prospect Wash that runs and kind of goes all the way down to the freeway and underneath it? I'm
glad you asked that question because Tangerine Road, we actually are doing a project right now, a project that we worked with the RTA on to identify wildlife linkages across the roadway. We identified an area for an actual bridge on Tangerine Road. So that'll be constructed with the next phase of Tangerine Road. So it's just one more piece in the puzzle. We're still working on, some of the other connections south. Obviously, I-10 is going to continue to be a challenge, but it's getting all of those pieces in motion to make sure we're not cutting off the opportunities down the road.
The town of Marana is dedicated to providing 5-star service for all residents, both 2- and 4-legged. Download the Marana Pets app to report a lost pet or upload a photo of a found pet. Start reuniting families today.
Are you splash savvy? In the event of a home drowning, you are the first responder. We'll walk you through the steps so you can prevent further complications until help arrives. Learn more from Marana Lifeguards, Marana Police, and Northwest Fire District at maranaaz.gov/splash savvy. We are first responders against drowning, and we are splash savvy.
Enjoy live music in Marana every third Thursday in the fall and spring at the beautiful Marana Municipal Complex Courtyard from 5 to 7 p.m. With theme nights, food trucks, and attractions, this free concert truly is a family-friendly experience. Visit maranaaz.gov/events for the complete schedule.
So Jennifer, also, you touched on one that we have planned for the future. Talk about ones that we've already worked on that have already been completed, underpasses where the wildlife goes under the roads. Can you talk about some of those that have been
Yeah,
constructed?
so we've got a couple of projects that we've done that on. We did that for Twin Peaks Road when that was built. That went through New Desert, so we wanted to make sure that we were accommodating wildlife there. So the town of Marana actually built the first mule deer crossing in the region with that project, and we were able to support that project with town resources as well as the Regional Transportation Authority, working in partnership with Game and Fish for studies. We were able to do some of the preliminary studies to identify where the hot spots were, where they're crossing the road, where they're not successfully making it, and we do post monitoring to see if the improvements made sense, if the fencing was working and things like that. So we were able to do that with Twin Peaks. We also did that with the first phase of Tangerine Road. So we didn't have any mule deer crossings with that first phase of Tangerine Road.
Mm-hmm.
We will in the second phase, which we just talked about. But in the first phase of Tangerine Road, we were able to oversize a number of culverts. So in partnership with Game and Fish, we were able to identify those areas of necessary crossing for a lot of these species based on the survey that they had done before we went to construction.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to make sure we addressed it ahead of time, that we were able to identify those areas and get them safely across the road. So it wasn't just oversizing the culverts. We actually had to make modifications to those culverts, which included escape ramps, which included, some species can't traverse the rocks.
Why would they need an escape route?
So some species can't get across the boulders. Some of them can't traverse the riprap, which we need for hydrology reasons, but it doesn't always work for the species. So we actually have ramps on the side where species can enter the culvert and successfully cross.
I think that's pretty doggone considerate of us to create ramps for those animals that can't get over the larger rocks.
It's very interesting, and it's very neat to get these partnerships with Game and Fish, the wildlife experts, and put them with the engineers to actually make these things happen. Little things that you don't think about, like needing sediment in the bottom. Are species going to actually enter the culverts if they're not comfortable to enter? So how do we, make sure that with the hydrology flowing through there, that we're able to maintain some level of sediment? And so baffles were designed to hold back some of the sediment to make sure that species would cross. So, you really have to look at what species are present in the area and what species you're looking to accommodate, because a culvert doesn't work for all species. A land bridge doesn't work for all species. You really have to design for what is in the area and what you really need to get across the road.
So let's talk about that right now. Let's talk about what we know is in the area. So you've talked about a couple of species here and there throughout the time that we've been talking this morning. But let's talk a little bit about what kind of species are we talking? You talked about mule deer, but what else is traversing these animal corridors?
Yeah. So a lot of the medium-sized crossings, as we call them, those are the crossings that are going to accommodate your javelina, your coyotes, your medium-sized species. A lot of your rabbits, a lot of your smaller species are also going to use
bobcats.
those.
I got a lot of bobcats by my house.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Bobcats absolutely would become comfortable in culvert situations. Where you really need to design for the openness index, get a much larger crossing, is when you get into mule deer and some of the prey species. They're not going to be comfortable going in tunnels. They just won't use them. So
little bit worried about a predator on the other end, perhaps.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. A lot of your smaller species, like your herps, snakes, those are going to use your smaller culverts. They're comfortable using some of the pipes. So, they wouldn't even need to be designed for a medium animal crossing.
Very good. So let's talk about a specific species, one that a while back caused, development throughout the region to kind of come to a screeching halt, no pun intended here, because we're talking about an owl, specifically the pygmy owl. Talk a little bit about where the pygmy owl is at, kind of what happened back then and where we're at with it today.
Yeah. So years ago, the Cactus phryginus pygmy owl became a listed species, and it came with critical habitat within the limits of the town of Marana. And so at that time, basically, as you said, all development stopped for a couple years because you had to have 2 consecutive years of negative surveys before a development could move forward. And so the town of Marana had taken on the endeavor of a habitat conservation plan. A habitat conservation plan basically is a plan that you create, that you design with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, that you develop your mitigation measures for that species up front. So that permit would actually allow development to move forward if the organization, or the town in this case, provided the mitigation for that species as well. So the town developed a habitat conservation plan, started that effort back early 2000s. And then the owl was delisted in 06. So it's kind of gone back and forth and back and forth. And there is now conversations of the pygmy owl being a listed species again. We don't currently.
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt you real quick a minute, Jennifer. Okay. So when you say listed, I want to make sure that our listeners understand. When you say listed, it means it's put on a list of species that are either endangered or what?
Yeah, so it's a listed species under the Endangered Species Act. So they can have different designations in the Endangered Species Act. They could be threatened, they could be endangered, they could be a candidate species. So there's different levels of listing.
What are they a candidate for?
Not that kind of candidate.
Not that kind of candidate.
No.
Okay.
Different kind of candidate. So it basically is a different classification for them based on the threats that are being proposed to that
So
species.
endangered would be the highest level, threatened would be the second highest?
Correct.
Okay, and candidate would be the third level of threat to a specific species.
Correct.
So the pygmy owls put on the endangered species list. We go through a lot of effort. It's not like putting this plan together that you guys did, the HCP, which wasn't done by Jennifer Flood by herself. There's a whole lot of people involved in that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when we took off on the habitat conservation planning, we put together what you call a technical biology team, and that team includes experts on every single species that you're looking at. You need your snake experts, you need your owl experts. So this group involved experts from the university, experts from Fish and Wildlife, from Game and Fish. It was pulling all of the technical experts together to provide the best information on the species. Because if the town of Marana is going to be successful in protecting these species and allowing habitats for them and mitigations for them, what does that look like? And we need the experts to tell us that.
Right. And so with all of these people coming together, you worked on it for multiple years before you brought it to fruition. It wasn't ultimately adopted. And some people get frustrated with that, like, why wasn't it adopted? But it was adopted essentially because the pygmy owl was taken off the endangered species list. Is that accurate?
Correct. So the town of Marana decided ultimately not to proceed with the habitat conservation plan as far as getting an incidental take permit from the Fish and Wildlife Service because the owl is delisted. So in addition to having our technical biology team and our scientific experts, we also had community partners. So we had environmental organizations as well as our developers and sand and gravel operators. And it was a very dynamic group and a very good group to help decide the future of this habitat conservation plan. And that was really beneficial for me and for the town of Marana because it's a balance, right? We absolutely have to balance the development needs with the environmental needs. So how do we do that successfully if we're not all in the same room talking? So it was very, very beneficial for the town.
Boy, I think that's a outstanding point that you make there, Jennifer, because I think most people understand that the fact that wildlife exists and that there's wildlife corridors doesn't mean that you can't develop. It means that you have to develop strategically and you have to develop thoughtfully. So talk a little bit about the impact that environmental issues and wildlife issues have on development as a whole, because you've worked in the environmental engineering field, you've worked in development services, you're now working in public works. So talk about, kind of how all these things kind of come together so that we're still able to allow people to move into this great community and be a part of it without shutting down all growth and saying, we can't have another house built.
Absolutely. And that's the difficult thing. People want to be here because it's such a valuable gem in the Sonoran Desert, and how do we do that without hindering our natural environment? And that's the balance that we have to find every single day. And I think, to answer your question, the key is it has to be at the forethought of every single project, whether it's a private development project or the town's public projects. What do we need to do with this project to successfully manage and protect our natural resources, whether it's in an area of a critical connection of a wildlife corridor, whether it's a transportation project that we need to identify wildlife crossings, whether it's even a particular saguaro that's very important to this community that needs protecting. You have to inventory the entire site and look at everything for the natural resources. And this goes to our cultural resources as well. It's very rich culturally here with archaeological resources. So it has to be the forefront of every planning project in the town, and it has to be looked at through that lens to identify what are those critical priority areas that the town needs to preserve.
All right. Well, man, I got to tell you, just about every time I sit down and talk with you, or any time I'm in a meeting where you're at talking about these issues, I always walk away with a greater understanding and a greater appreciation. I actually feel like, and I know this is not easy, but I actually feel like I walk away a little bit smarter too. So that's a plus for me anyway. So Jen, we've covered a lot of things here, but is there anything in particular that you want to make sure that you convey to our listeners about the natural environment here in Marana and the connection between the town, government services, what we do day in and day out, and making sure that our residents get to continue to enjoy this beautiful Sonoran Desert?
Absolutely. I think the key is just communication. I think having the conversations, finding out what regulations are out there, what policies are out there, what designations are actually out there to protect a lot of our lands, what plans are in place. I think that is critical to just understanding, the town's vision of where we want to go with our natural environment. And I'm happy to talk with anybody at any time about it because it's a passion of mine, and I know a number of people here would be. So I think that's probably my biggest thing is just communication. If people have questions or want to learn more, this is what we love, and our community is very important to us. So that's what we would love to do, is just have those conversations.
So much appreciate those comments, Jen. I think it really speaks to the heart of the town of Marana, not only the compassion and passion for the people, but for the environment as well. And so some very important points here made today. So I just want to thank you to our listeners. I want to say thank you to our listeners for dropping in and listening to this episode and to our other episodes, and for being a part of Real Talk. You're really what makes this thing function. So be sure to continue to drop those questions in. We enjoy hearing from you. And that concludes this episode of Real Talk with the Town. Until next time. Submit your questions by visiting maranaaz.gov/realtalk, and we'll answer them right here. To receive notifications for new releases, remember to click subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Also, please follow the town on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay up to date on current news and events.